You're listening to the Play Therapy Podcast with Dr. Brenna Hicks, your source for centered and focused play therapy coaching.
Hi, I'm Dr. Brenna Hicks, the Kid Counselor. This is the Play Therapy Podcast where you get a masterclass in child-centered play therapy and practical support and application for your work with children and their families. In today's episode, I am answering a question from Malley in Texas. And Malley's question is about being a play therapist without your own children and how that might influence parents' perceptions and just the dynamic of not being a parent yourself, but working with parents' children, your clients' parents, and how to best navigate that. So, Malley, thank you so much for this question. This is really helpful, and I have a couple of personal anecdotal stories that I'll throw in as a result of your question. So you'll see that you're not alone in this is the point of that. And so I'll read parts of her email, and then we'll talk about it together. So she said, thanks so much for all the work that you do to advocate for CCPT and train competent, compassionate professionals. Yes, thank you for all of you for wanting to be competent, compassionate professionals. I can't do this without you wanting to be the best clinicians you can be. So I'm very happy to do it, and thank you for saying that. I have been working my way through your podcast. I will be starting my internship this spring, and I can't wait to start applying my knowledge to practical skills in the playroom. My question for you is, when it comes to communicating with a client's parents, do you have any advice for a therapist who doesn't have children of their own and doesn't plan to have any? Like many others, my biggest fear right now is working with parents. Yes, so many people fear that. I imagine there will be some parents who are hesitant to trust me or utilize any skills I suggest simply because I'm not a parent. While this is somewhat understandable, it's also disheartening for me to think about. I really do delight in children and their experiences, and I'm so passionate about working with them, but having kids of my own is not part of the plan for my life. Is contempt from parents just going to be something I'll have to learn to completely shrug off? That seems like a recipe for burnout. I've asked several different professors this question and received as many different answers, but I'd really love to hear your thoughts if you have the time. Yes, I'm happy to share my thoughts. So Malley, again, thanks so much for this email. All right, here's a funny story. So I was without children. I was relatively new out of grad school. I want to say I was probably 25 and had gotten my master's. Actually, I must have been 26 because I had gotten my graduate certificate by that point. So I'd finished my master's and I had my graduate certificate in play therapy. So I had to have been 26. And I will never forget this. I'm sitting down with this mom and she wanted me to work with her, I want to say maybe 3 or 4-year-old son. And she was very, very anxious and very high strung and just, it was like oozing out of her. And we had been maybe 30 minutes into the initial parent consultation. And she pauses and says, I just have a question to ask you. Do you have children? And I said, no, not yet. And she goes, because I mean no disrespect, but like you look really young. And I kind of nodded my head like, well, yeah, I guess. And I don't even think she was really that much older than me. She was maybe mid-30s. So it wasn't like we're talking, like 25 to 50 range here. But anyway, so she was older than me, but I don't consider her to be that much older. And she's like, you just look really young. And so I kind of smiled and acknowledged what she said. And then she goes, you don't even have wrinkles. And so I've always thought about that moving forward. So in my head, and ever since, I've gone, so clearly you can't be a competent play therapist if you don't have children and you don't have wrinkles. So I remember even thinking at the time, what does this have to do with me being able to help your kid? So Malley, you're not alone. That's the moral of that story. And here's another thought. I have often gone back to that conversation in my head, and I don't know if you all do this. Okay, I'm going to go on a tangent for a second. I don't know if you all do this, but I do it all the time. And my husband finds it funny because he does not do this whatsoever. So I don't know if it's a female thing. I don't know if it's a Brenna thing. I don't know what it is. Maybe y'all can email me and say, yes, Brenna, you're not crazy. I do the same thing. Or you can say, yeah, it is 100% you're crazy. But here's the story. I always replay prior conversations in my head. and I come up with things that would have been more effective to say, or things I wish I would have said, or different ways in which I would have responded, or when they said this, man, it would have been so much better if you would have said this. So I will reconstruct past conversations and think through things that I might have used as an illustration or told as a story, or, well, that probably would have helped them better understand that if you would have said that. I do this all the time. And he goes, no, that conversation is over and you're never going to be able to have it again. So why would you think through it? I think it's normal to do that. I don't know. Weigh in. Brenna@thekidcounselor.com. Okay, so now I'm back to, I've often thought if I had that conversation to do over again, here's what I would have said. And maybe this will help all of you if you don't have children and you don't have wrinkles and someone is questioning your competence as a result. I've often wanted to say, just because I don't have cancer doesn't mean that I can't be a doctor that treats a patient with cancer. Or just because I don't have a cavity doesn't mean that I can't be a dentist that can treat and fill the cavity. This notion that you have to have a child of your own to be able to provide play therapy to a child, that doesn't extend to any other field. Oncologists don't have cancer themselves. Dentists don't necessarily have cavities, but they're still competent and they're able to help people and provide services for people because of their training, because of their education, their knowledge, their background. So I don't think that it even makes sense for anyone to say, if you don't have children, you can't work with children. Just because it doesn't make sense doesn't mean it doesn't happen, though. So Malley, I think this is a valid question. And I think here are the strategies, or my thoughts at least. Let's put it that way. You have to meet with parents and you have to be confident. Now, so many of you in the collective that listen to the podcast, that are in my coaching programs, so many of you constantly talk about, I want to be more confident. I want to feel more confident. I want to be able to confidently communicate. I want to be able to confidently explain what's going on. So I think pervasively, we kind of as a field and as clinicians, we feel a lack of confidence often. But here's the thing. You are trained to do this work. Even if your only training is listening to the podcast, I know it's hard to get solid CCPT training, which is why this Play Therapy podcast exists. This is why my coaching program exists. This is why the collective exists. Why? Because it's hard to get solid CCPT training. However, you have the training to do clinical work. Even if you're still in grad school, you still have been trained in how to do clinical work. And then even if the only training you have in CCPT is listening to the podcast, you understand the fundamentals. So you have to take that knowledge and you have to confidently present that you are capable of helping. And way back when I talked about a confidence-competence loop, that's a very valid factor here. So if you have no idea what I'm talking about, go back and listen. But confidence and competence are intertwined. So when we sit down with parents, we have to believe in our competency, and therefore we are more confident. We have to believe in our confidence, and we become more competent. And ideally, the number one factor in meeting with parents is never about your credentials. It's never about what training you've had specifically. It's never about your degree. It's never about how many letters you have after your name. We have a lot of alphabet soup in our industry. Parents don't care about any of that. They care about whether or not you can help their child. And so what you're going to do when you meet with parents, Malley, whether you have children or not, you don't. We know that, right? But if they question that, if they're worried about that, you make sure that they know, like, and trust you. Those are the factors of why someone will commit to bring their kid to you. They know, like, and trust you. And you're confident in what you're going to do, why you're going to do it. You trust the model, you trust the process, you trust yourself. And you effectively communicate that CCPT works. And all of that says, we know that this will help get you to the outcome that you want. What we're really communicating to parents is that there's hope. So the goal when we meet with parents is not convince them of anything. It's they have to know that you can help, and they have to know, like, and trust you. So that's why articulation matters. That's why communication matters. That's why understanding how to convey the model and all of that. And whether you have kids or not, that becomes irrelevant at that point. Whether you have wrinkles or not, it becomes irrelevant. All parents care about is, are you able to support us in getting us closer to where we want to be as a family, closer to having a happy, healthy child? If the answer is yes, they will not care that you are not a parent. So, Malley, really, thanks so much for this. I hope this is encouraging to all of you, especially those of you who have been second-guessed or doubted for a variety of reasons. It really is about communicating with confidence that people can trust you, and they need to know and like you too. But really, it's about trusting in the process and trusting you to help them get there. So thanks a lot for the question. Hope you find that helpful. Love y'all. We'll talk again soon. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Play Therapy Podcast with Dr. Brenna Hicks. For more episodes and resources, please go to www.playtherapypodcast.com.